how you are fallen, O Babylon, that in 1 hour your wealth has come to naught. We've talked a lot about Babylon in the Kingdom Rising series, and today we are going to be unmasking it so that we can see it clearly in our own lives. Babylon, as we've been talking about, is the system of control that spreads itself throughout the world, that is dominated by those who have greed, lust for power, and so much fear that they want to build great walls around themselves so that they can have some sense of meaning, purpose, or security. Today, we're going to be talking about how Babylon affects us in our daily lives, how it actually gets down into the culture and makes us do things that we would not do otherwise, how it steals from us our honor and integrity and makes us into something other than who and what we are. So let's talk about that as we walk together down creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie, and I am a Christopagan druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan druid and sous chef to the Dagda.
And today we're going to be unmasking Babylon in our regular daily life. This is based off of an essay that I wrote over at creationspaths.com, which I highly invite you to go over and read the full thing. We are only going to be scratching the surface of everything that's in there, and there's a lot that we're not going to be able to talk about on today's episode. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever the app is you're listening to us on. We work really hard to have the best Christopagan creation spirituality centered information for you to help you live your life better, and you don't want to miss a thing. Also, while you're there, if you happen to have the means of supporting us, maybe think about becoming a paid member, because that really helps us to do all of the things that we're doing. Thank you. All right, let's just jump into it now, shall we?
I had a lot of fun with this article and exploring Babylon, not just as this concept of we're all stuck in Babylon. We addressed that a little bit before when we were talking about how do you live in Babylon, and not so much as in this thing that's over there. It's easy to be like, oh, this other country that's not me is Babylon, or this other city or county or city block even is the Babylon place, but not here. Babylon is the set of systems. It is those powers and principalities that are at play in all of our lives. This is why all of us live in Babylon, because we're affected by it. And I really liked in this Unmasking of Babylon how you went through talking about each of the different systems that are in direct effect on us.
And right after the passage that I alluded to in the opening is the first quote in the article where it lists all of the things that Babylon cannot sell anymore. It may seem like just a big long list, but really pay attention to the last two items on it: people and souls.
Yeah, they really hit going through. Like, it's been a while since I've read through Revelations. I get squidgy about playing around in it because of the curse associated with Revelations and stuff. It really just hit because it's all these things. It's things that we buy, we sell, when we have no use for, we just throw away because it's just a thing. Light breaks, put it in a trash can. The blender doesn't work anymore, throw it away, buy a new one. Just replaced. It's just a thing. We do this all the time in our daily lives. And seeing people.
Not just people, but people and souls.
People and souls, yeah. Yeah, because the first thing is I wanted to make it this other and be like, oh, maybe they're talking about like demons collecting and selling souls, like something out of the fantasies that we watch and read, soul traders and stuff. And it's like, actually, this is systems. This is things that are actually affecting us. It's real stuff.
So a brief side tangent on the Book of Revelation. The Book of Revelation was written in reaction to a very real conspiracy theory that was going around at the time, that Nero did not actually die when he was assassinated and fled to the east, and that he was there in Palmyra or one of the other empires, actually raising forces to come back and reconquer Rome and get revenge on everyone who did not protect him, did not keep him alive and in power, and that revenge was going to fall on everyone, even the people, because they didn't rise up at his assassination. And this was a very widely believed idea in the first couple centuries. And in fact, several people actually pretended to be Nero and tried to raise armies to do just that. Because of that, we don't have to guess about what any of the symbols in the story mean. The beast will be known because his name is the number of a man. Yes, 666, the name of Nero. Oh, wait, some manuscripts say 619, which is the way you would add up an alternate spelling of Caesar Nero. So it's very clearly referring to him. Babylon, a city on 7 hills, that's Rome. Everybody who would have read the story at the time knew what this was. And the commodification that's being talked about here is actually a future date. He's already come back. He's already conquered. He has already taken control of everything and has created this great system that runs the entire world. And in that system, people are buying and selling souls and people. This is so hauntingly reminiscent of what happens today when people talk about the labor force, the workforce, or just simply labor. And that is a commodification of people so that they're not people anymore. They're just widgets that get moved around. They're tokens that are passed around from company to company to company. And the actual cares and concerns of those tokens don't really matter. That's not what any of the numbers or indicators are designed to look at. Just what is the availability of this resource and how is it being traded back and forth.
And you can even see that when you hear the government wanting to talk, well, they don't like to talk about the unemployment numbers, but the unemployment numbers isn't how many people do not have work or are unable to acquire work. These are the number of people that are drawing from unemployment insurance. And that's a completely smaller and different subset. This is basically how many of the widgets are actually costing the state, not as in people that need work. It's still dehumanizing people that want to be able to provide and take care of themselves.
If you really want to see this, I'll get the link to Brian and we'll make sure that it's in the show notes for this episode. There have been several articles written recently that have pointed to a interesting correspondence in the jobs numbers. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head right now, but I think it was like several 100,000 Black women lost their jobs during that time period, and an exactly equivalent number of white men found jobs. Exactly the same number. Now, whether those numbers are accurate or not, it says something about what that report is designed to show people. See, we replaced this group that we deem as lesser with this group that we deem as higher. So that's the message the report's trying to get out. And from what we can actually see from the real world, those numbers seem to actually be balanced like that. But that's not looking at the people. That's looking at the commodities. The jobs are what matter. The people are just sprockets that can be plugged in or exchanged one for another.
Another way you can see that, when you really think about it, it really resonates because all of us, most of us, have to mess with resumes and going through the resume process. One way you could really look at this is a letter of authenticity that you're having to present on yourself as a product that you are selling to a company. And when the company looks at this letter of authenticity, they either accept it as it is or they call your previous owners to verify elements of that letter of authenticity.
Usually just whether or not you are a good worker or not actually what you did there.
They're not even verifying the knowledge base because the system is there to tell us, to get us to buy into it, that this is a display of our knowledge base and to show off our capabilities. And really, it's just can we fill out the letter of authenticity?
Which is why the stories are always, and after they had this job for X number of years, they were found out not to have the credentials that they said they had or the experience that they said they had, because that's not actually what is being checked when those documents are being reviewed. And this is all part of how the system self-heals. I cite 2 of the prophets in there who talk about how the unjust rulers make unjust laws for themselves and they take over the courts so that the poor will no longer have access to justice. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, to stay in line with the tradition that I am a part of and that I practice. But also, when I say that this is a problem that has haunted us from time immemorial. These are writings from 500 years before the Common Era, and they're complaining about the same thing that we're complaining about now. Because as much as we've changed the labels, we haven't actually changed the system. When the early democracies formed, they moved the noble titles over to the business class, and things continued on exactly as it had been before. In my own country, only rich white landowners were even given the right to vote, which oddly enough looks a lot like the English state, where the lords and ladies, who were the landed gentry, the people who owned the land, had more say in the running of government than everyone else. Wait, I think I see what they did there. This provides two functions, and it's really the second one that I want to dig into today. But the first is, it entrenches our. We have corrupted the system so that we can get away with crimes that we want to get away with, and we are creating crimes that allow us to control the people that we want to control. For example, marijuana was initially criminalized in the United States as an excuse to deport Mexicans. In fact, it's very clear in the legislation that the penalty for being caught with what many of the laws actually refer to as Mexican tobacco or Mexican cigarettes, not even referring to it as marijuana, was deportation, which seems like an odd thing to do to your own citizens. But since it was not commonly used or enforced on the population they wanted to keep, it made for a very good way to get rid of the people that they didn't want to have here. And so they created a law that they could utilize to target the community that they wanted to target. That happens a lot. We see that a lot. And I could really go off on a tangent here about what is currently happening in our country, but I'm not, because I want to get to the heart of the issue and what we can do about it. But the most corrosive effect that these unjust laws have and these corrupt judges have is on the way that we perceive what is right and wrong. Most people, and I've learned this the hard way, don't actually think about for themselves what is right and what is wrong. They do not have a strong sense of what is moral or what is ethical. Now, moral is how I live my life and the strictures by which I govern me. Ethics is how we live our lives together. What rules govern this relationship between me and them and me? That's ethics. Most people that I have discussed this with in my life have not really thought about what should be deemed. I often, and this was really upsetting. I found this out because I thought everybody just kind of sat around and pondered these like deep philosophical questions as I did. Most people shorthand this to whatever is legal is at least okay, if not good. So long as it's legal, they can do it. Or this gets broadened out in some places to they have a right or a justification to do it. And before we kind of break this down, it's really important to understand how morality and ethics work in a person. For the most part, moral and ethical ideas are post hoc constructions. I should not have said it that way, but I did, and I'll explain. So we typically, as people, don't sit back and go, I want to do this. Is it morally or ethically a good thing to do? Both checked yes, ergo, I shall do it. What we actually do is go, I want to do this. I did it. Oh, people are going to find out I did it. How can I justify what I just did so that it comes across as moral or ethical? That is not a condemnation on people. That's how the brain works. We most often, in most of our actions, are not having that interruption to the process to ask ourselves what is moral, ethical. We just do, and then after the fact, come up with justifications.
You can think about it just in one simple example I think most of us have faced. We're in the city, we're walking along the sidewalk, we need to cross the street, and our legs are tired. The actual end of the block where we could cross the street on the crosswalk is way down there. There's no cars, there's nobody in the way, so we just cross the street to the other side, and then afterwards we suddenly go, I jaywalk. Or we might not even consider it, but usually afterwards we start to go through the law, the ethics, the morality of what we just did, and a lot of times we justify the ethics of it by going, well, no one was there, I interfered with nobody else's passage through their right of way or anything like that, which is why most people just go, well, no one was there and I just crossed the street. What was the harm? Because we're taking an ethical position in that. And I mean, that's just one common example that we all go through, but we don't think about that beforehand.
And there actually are weird ethical concerns that come in there. But again, not to go down a rabbit hole, we don't tend to have those thoughts. We just do. We are doing critters. This is why it comes as a great shock to a lot of people that we are also not rational. We're not rational. We reason after the fact. We often don't have a reason for why we did a thing. We wanted to do a thing. We did the thing. We then come up with a reason either while we're doing the thing or shortly thereafter so that we can justify the thing. Again, that's just how the human brain tends to do things. Now, one of the things that we learn in our meditation practice is to try to short circuit that so that we can insert that moment of mindfulness before taking action. But again, that is something that we learn, not something that is absolutely native to the way that our brain works. So when we are operating within a corrupt system, well, of course, you pay bribes to the people. That's just how stuff gets done. The morals, the ethics of the situation don't come into play. The way that the streets stay clean and crime gets taken off of the streets, people are often willing to look the other way because if they don't know, if it's out of sight and out of mind, they don't really care as long as they don't have to worry about getting mugged or robbed. And I know this from experience because when I lived in Oakland, we did not have police patrolling the streets, but we did have patrols on the streets and they did lower the crime rate. And we just didn't ask how. We were just...
Or when we saw it happening, how it happened, we just kind of looked the other way.
Yeah.
Sometimes even cheered it on.
And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm just saying that that's how we are. As we tend to follow whatever the easiest path is. It's important to remember that the brain is lazy. And again, I know that is a shock to some people. Was a shock to me as somebody who is a just overly competent overthinker of everything. I can overthink the smallest things. This actually is kind of a game that my friends play with me where they give me a simple little thing. And now, how would you even overthink this? Oh, I can show you. Here we go. Pick it all down. Like, that's just how I do. It's how I am. But for the vast majority of us, we just accept the system that we live in because it's all that we know. And it's also all that we have time to know because, well, survival is important. We have to make money. We have to be able to put food on the table, pay the rent, and our jobs do everything that they can to keep us so tired, so burnt out, and so isolated from one another that we don't have time to really have those conversations. They pass rules that we're not allowed to talk about our paychecks with one another. So we don't start having some of those, ethical questions as why are certain people being paid more than others? And how does the pay system at this company actually work? And while in some places, banning conversations like that are a violation of labor laws, in other places they're not. But it's just assumed that, well, they wouldn't tell us we couldn't do this if it was something we could do. So people just nod their heads and go along with it. And that's how this corrupting system of Babylon works its way down into the very way that we live our lives.
When you're talking about the laws, a lot of people will just default to whatever the laws are the code that they're going to live by. That is their moral and ethics. So if the law doesn't say you can't ban employees from doing a thing, or that you can't just fire someone because you felt like it right there on the spot and pay no penalty or owe the employee any kind of severance for this whim, then it's perfectly legitimate to do that. You can just throw them out on the street. Doesn't matter how loyal they were or years of service or whatever they've contributed, that you're done with them, they can leave, and that is it. And most people will just default to the laws and go, yeah, perfectly acceptable. And then that's where you get these weird, it's not ethics, because ethics are more universal. It's just whatever the laws are for the area. So some areas say, no, you must pay the employee the unemployment if you just fire them on a whim. And other places go, you owe them nothing. They're done. They're gone.
And so you just said something that's very important there. Ethics and laws are something different, and they are. The reason we have laws is because we have conflicting ethical systems. Well, let's just imagine for a moment that we live in the horror landscape that the Christian nationalists are wanting to bring about. Now, I know, and you probably know the real answer to this, but how do you then make laws based off of Christian ethics? Catholics have a very different ethical scheme than Lutherans do, than Presbyterians do, than Evangelicals do, than Mormons do. The ethical systems in each of these schools of Christianity are different. Just going into Catholicism, just one of these groups, and I, again, didn't list all of them. There are 50,000 denominations in the United States alone. I'm only talking about a few here. But just going into Catholicism, a Franciscan will see the ethical concerns here different than a Dominican or an Augustinian or a Jesuit.
And on top of that, we're not even getting into the morals. That's more that personal belief that kicks in.
And so what we do is we hammer out laws. Laws are where I bring my ethics into the debate, you bring your ethics into the debate, and we come to a formal agreement as to how that will be worked out in law. In other words, what will have the penalty of punishment if it is violated. Not all ethics rise to that occasion. And so when you hear somebody saying, of course you can legislate morality, we do that, thou shalt not kill. Well, yeah, of course you have a law against murder. One, yes, that hopefully is part of your morality, but that is also part of your ethical system. Hopefully that you don't just, run around willy-nilly killing people. But also that's an easy ethic for us to come to an agreement on. I can think of very few ethical systems that would say, just murder on a whim, good idea. Most of them would disagree with that. So that's the low-hanging fruit. We can all agree on the ethics of, not killing people at whim. Yay. Yes, we can agree on that. How do you fund a school system? Oh, there's going to be a lot of ideas in there, some of which will involve ethics, some of which will involve ideology, and some of which will involve various philosophies that people bring to the task. Oh, now we're in a much more complicated situation because the only tools that governments have are reward and punishment. So we are rewarding somebody who meets the criteria that we set up for a school by funding it. And we are punishing those who do not meet the criteria for what we call a school by either not funding them or defunding them, which is a thing that can happen. So now we have a much bigger dilemma here that is beyond ethics. My ethics, your ethics may or may not agree with each other, but my ideology about how to do education might not agree with your ideology on how to do education. And this is where conversation is supposed to come in and us to hash out an agreement on how we are going to do that particular thing. Most things that we are actually talking about in law have those extra factors on top of ethics that make them even muddier than just what we think is right or wrong or correct action, because there's other interests and ideas to bring into it. And so that is how law is supposed to function. Law is not a distillation of ethics because you really can't do that. And so when people start relying on it as the way for them to determine what is right and wrong for them to do, they're starting with a faulty source. That is not the purpose or the function of law. It's even worse when those laws have been corrupted and damaged to be beneficial to a few people, and other people find ways to exploit those laws for their own benefit. Again, we are not talking about ethics. We're talking about legality. What does the government grant to itself the permission to punish or reward? And I know it feels like I'm doing a lot of vocabulary work here, and some of you might already know this. This is very basic civics 101. I don't even know if this is 101 civics. This might be like prelude to civics or something. But in the more conversations I have with folk, the less they understand the purpose of these three things. And it's even worse when those who are in our government don't seem to understand the difference between these three things. And our legislators use terms like legislate morality, which literally means we have the right to tell people how to live. When you know that they just confused, hopefully, morality and ethics, and they think that they're legislating ethics when, again, they're not.
And we could see where this comes into play, like not that long ago during the thing. I think I can't say its name because apparently, they're trying to erase it as best they can. But people confused the morality of like me wearing a mask as a choice of me versus the ethics of if I am sick and I want to be out amongst other people because I might have to be out amongst other people because I have to get groceries and do things because our society forces us to be out. I should cover to reduce the spread of my illness. That's an ethical thing I should do as a fellow member of the community. And though the government doesn't have the right to tell me I have to wear a mask, like when I'm sitting in my house amongst myself, they do have the right ethically to govern my interactions with the greater community when I'm out in public spaces. And yet people confuse the morality of the government can't tell a person individually what they can do. What is the public good?
And what we are lacking here is a vital and living tradition that understands what is honorable action to take. And it's because that word has been tortured and broken and harmed so much that when I bring it up, people bring with them so much baggage that they don't want to have the conversation. Because honor is really how you live in Babylon. It's how you actually defeat these systems and keep them from working their harm on you. Because honor is something different than what we were talking about here. So a person's integrity is how they act when nobody's looking. What do you do when nobody will know the results of your actions? Do you kick the puppy? Do you steal the little chocolate from the dish, knowing that nobody will know that you did it? Do you steal the cookie? That's integrity, that you do what you say you will do even when nobody is watching, nobody at all. Compassion, which we talk about a lot, is how you treat people that can never pay you. A compassionate person doesn't think about whether or not they will get rewarded for what they're doing. They simply know this person needs help. I'm going to help them. Honor, and you can see how this gets really abused, is how well you live in right relationship with others. That's why your honor comes with you, because you know this is an honorable person. If he gives his word, he's going to keep it. If she said she's going to do this, she's going to do it. That's really what honor is. It's in our relationships with each other. We always keep to the best practices. Now, yeah, that gets distorted and weird ideas start getting overlapped onto it that have more to do with, making sure that you're saying that you're a big man or whatever. And that's something that we have to watch out for in any system that we participate in.
I think it's also why when somebody wants to impugn another's honor or discuss another person being dishonorable and it's opposite, the easiest path to pointing that out is to point at a person's hypocrisy.
Yes.
When a person is being a hypocrite, they are being dishonorable.
And that's why that charge used to mean something. Because honor goes to trustworthiness. It goes to how well do you keep your word, or how do you live in society. An honorable person is somebody that lives well in society.
To go back to my example earlier, this is how I knew a lot of the church leaders were dishonorable. They spent so much time talking about the apocalypse, the horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Death. Oh, wait. And they talk about taking on the mantle of Jesus, the mantle of this, the mantle of that. Somebody intentionally going out in public with a plague to spread that plague or encouraging others to do that is having them take on the mantle of the horsemen of the apocalypse plague.
Since you keep wanting to go to this particular example, this is actually something that gets talked about from a certain angle in the article. This is what the Silversmiths of Ephesus were talking about. This is the whole problem with them. They had muddled together their faith with their livelihood. And here's Paul running around saying, idols are just stone. You know that, right? They're just stone and metal and wood. Like, they're just stone, metal, and wood. They don't move around at night. They just sit there. Got them all concerned because they were making idols. And if you notice, they give lip service in that passage to he's impugning the honor of the great goddess, but they don't really seem focused on that. They're focused on their livelihood. And I have to say, as a silversmith, there are a lot of things you can make with silver. There are a lot of ways to make your livelihood as a silversmith. You don't just have to make overlays for statues. But this is what they got very concerned about. And that's the same thing that happened, I'm just going to say it, during the pandemic. These church folk saw that they weren't raking in money at the rate that they were because they weren't having these in-person church services where they could apply social pressure to people to give them money, declared that it was somehow blasphemous for us to take care of each other during a global pandemic. It was about the money. Now, with their mouths, they said all kinds of words that were like, they hate God and they're trying to stop the church. And yes, this was all
They brought up
a game to stop people from going to church.
They brought up the favorite verse that we mentioned last week. Yeah.
And they fought and they fought and they fought. And they're still to this day harping on about it because it gives them an excuse to center power in themselves. And that's really what we need to be looking at when we were talking about the influence of Babylon. Babylon looks at three things. It's fear. I mean, fear is really all of it. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit next week, but fear really is the heart of it. But it's that fear that I'm not enough, I'm unworthy. Maybe people are out to get me, a certain paranoia that makes people want to grow this illusion of power and wealth and dominance around themselves so that they can trick themselves into thinking that maybe I am enough, because they don't believe that. Maybe I am worthy because they really don't believe that. Maybe this will keep me safe, even though they really don't believe that. Because fear, when we lean into it like that, grows. What little thing that you do now can mitigate that fear? Well, you'll figure out a way that maybe somebody could get around that. So you have to do more and more and more. And slowly you isolate yourself. You cut yourself off. You bring this alienation down that keeps you from having a truly abundant life. Oh, you can have a life with a lot of things in it, but those things are not going to be close friendships, relationships. You know, those ones you actually remember when you laughed with your friends or you did something fun together. They're just empty, hollow. And that's what we have to watch out for. Anytime anyone is encouraging us to lean in to those fears, they're encouraging us to give in to these powers that are really going to be harmful in the end. Anytime you feed your fears like that, and I'm not talking about like, let's go to a horror movie. Those are for thrills, not fears. There's actually a difference between the two, but it's all that right now. I'm talking about those fears of, you know, you're really not enough, or you don't have enough, or there isn't enough to go around. They love there isn't enough to go around. And they constantly manufacture crises so that at least momentarily that becomes true. So they can say, look, see, it's true. There's a shortage now. There are always shortages. You should just give in. And that's kind of what's going on right now.
That's one of those things I really like how he wrapped up in the article. Like, that's why it's so important to have eyes to see and ears to hear, and why it was important to take time to really unmask Babylon. Because we all live in it, it is so important for us to be able to see it, to hear it when it's happening, so that then we know what we can then see easily. This is the game that's happening. This is the end game. This is what they're after. And then we can choose our action instead of reacting to the situation.
A house divided against itself cannot stand. Anytime you hear anyone say you should be afraid of those people over there, aren't those people scary? Wouldn't it be scary? Start looking at their motivations. They often don't actually care about what they're saying. They're just trying to make sure that you're afraid so that they can exercise power, domination, and control over you.
In addition to that, just remember back to the earlier episodes in this series that we covered when we talked about they need that fear to come into your house as the burglar in the night to bind you, the strong person, so that you won't be able to do anything about it.
So I hope that this was helpful for you. There's, like I said, there's a lot more over in the article over at creationspath.com. If you have any questions, don't forget that you can either leave a comment here or over on that article, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or creationspath.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they don't notify us, so we won't know. But you can leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to creationspaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave a message there, and we will see it, and we will be able to get back to you. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars, you can pass our way. We offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both, and you can support us using the Cash App hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. We are ever so grateful. Thank you so much. You all really do help us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on our table. If we've ever said anything that's helped you out, please share it with others. That helps us out more than you know. And as we're going out today, normally I say a prayer to someone, and I just want to say a prayer that Julian of Norwich gave us 3 times. All shall be well. All shall be well. All shall be well. Because in the end, most of the things that we are most frightened come and go. All shall be well.
Amen.